And joining me tonight, the art teacher from Templeton Elementary School, Kelly Murphy, Roy Reynolds, Associate Instructor from the School of Education at Indiana University, and finally, Dr. John Koopman, the Superintendent from the Monroe County Community School Corporation. Thank you all so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. Dr. Koopman, why don't we start with you and talk about some of the things that we just saw and what the situation is like here in Monroe County.
Well, certainly everything that Professor Lackey as well as Patrick Bullock indicated are important assets for educating youth to be well-rounded, and all of the things that were spoken to in relationship to how arts education, physical education, music education enhance opportunities for academic achievement. And so I also want to kind of piggyback on what Patrick just mentioned in relationship to the agonizing decisions that have to be made when you have to reduce expenditures in school districts. And we certainly feel like that all programs are important, and everybody that is teaching those are experts in the field, and what they provide for our students is invaluable going forward. So there aren't any easy decisions when you have to reduce expenditures in schools, but it just came down to what we were going to do. And specifically, arts education wasn't highlighted or targeted, and we're going to try to continue to have all facets of fine arts, performing arts, physical education, and music education going forward. There were a few casualties in relationship to budget reductions, but we feel like that we can continue to function at a fairly high level and offer almost all of the course selections that we previously did with the staffing. Now, in Kelly's situation, for instance, in our process, it's called reduction in force, and how things move forward in relationship to teacher licensing and who gets bumped, so to speak. And so in some of those situations, it's unfortunate that the last one hired is the first one to go, and sometimes those enthusiastic young educators are the ones that we feel like are going to be invaluable in future classrooms. But it's the process that kind of drives what goes on in many school districts. So we're sick about all of it, quite honestly.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to briefly touch upon, the media center, the library educators that are going to be cut pretty much across the board. In particular, why was that decision made so that people can understand?
You know, there really, I can't explain that there is a sound rationale for anything that we did other than the fact that we had to find about $5.5 million in our budget, in its general fund budget. You know, and when I speak to the various audiences that I have the opportunity to speak to, there's about 5 funds that fund school districts, and the general fund is the one that is funded by the state of Indiana through sales and income tax now. And that's the one that was cut by the governor and that was underfunded to begin with. And that's 91% personnel and salary and benefits. So to try to find $5.5 million out of the general fund budget was very, very difficult. So I can't say that, I mean, we needed to find in an equitable, proportional cut programs that we could find $5.5 million. And so we tried to look as hard as we could to try to find that $5.5 million, and some programs were casualties of that.
Well, Kelly, why don't we go to you? We've been talking about you. and yeah, it was a reduction in force, and this was your first year teaching art at Templeton. What has this year been like, and what do you see students getting out of classes and art classes such that you teach?
Well, my biggest concern right now about the reduction in force that's happening and the budget cuts and the teachers that are being cut is that I realize that the programs are still going to be offered for now. They say that the art and music and PE will still stay in the schools. But I really feel like the teachers who teach those subjects have already been affected, because media specialists are part of our team. You know, we're called specials, and I feel like because they've already been cut across the board, not just cutting bits and pieces from everywhere, it makes me really nervous that the arts or PE or music could possibly be next. And the kids are very upset because they hear what people are talking about. They know that I'm going, and their thought is that Mrs. Murphy's going, that means we don't have art next year. They're little kids, you know. I try to explain to them, no, you will still have an art teacher, but they don't understand that. They see it as art going as well.
Okay, very interesting, and we'll get more to this subject in just a minute, but now let's go to Stan in our radio booth right now. Stan?
Thanks, Ann. When we left off with Patrick Bolick, we were talking about the expense of art education programs. I wanted to get back into that briefly and ask you, what do you tell people who say to you, aren't these programs too expensive to cut, and couldn't we save money by getting rid of them first?
My background is as a instrumental music director at the high school level, so I can speak to the amount of equipment and time and energy that goes into that. So yes, those are expensive programs to manage. The equipment is expensive, the annual upkeep, and the fortifying of those programs are expensive. I think educators, music and visual and performing arts specialists, administrators and communities have a responsibility to develop and build excellent programming that attracts a large number of students. And there are programs across the country that do that very thing. And when everybody is invested in it, students, parents, community, administration, those programs then become immovable. They become part of the DNA of the school and the community. And there's great pride and great support in that.
Do you think that the Obama administration, which announced, of course, education as one of its big priorities, is ignoring this issue at all of arts in the classroom? Obviously, there are bigger things going on, financial reform, healthcare reform. Are there other things that are on its plate ahead of education that's getting this pushed to the back burner?
I don't think they're ignoring this, and I've been on several workshops across the country that have been sponsored by the government, and I feel they're very committed, and the people who are part of those administrative teams that are explaining the information and challenging people to step forward, that it is a priority. And I think that the dollars that are allocated towards it will continue to support it.
Let's talk a little bit about those dollars. How do you see this type of education being funded in the coming years? I mean, is it going to be a combination maybe of federal and state and maybe even private funding?
I think it will be a fusion of both public dollars and private dollars. I just saw somebody bought a Picasso for $100 million. So I know there's money out there, and I think those people have to be brought to the table to see the value of this. I think what's important and unique to the Fairview String program in its partnership also with Indiana University is that they're looking at this as a scientific model, that they are collecting data, they're showing the relevance of this. They have a control group as well that's also participating, and so they're looking at the data to see, is student attendance improving? Do students have a better attitude? Are they more motivated? Are they more collaborative? They're looking at the big picture, and I think more organizations that look at this thoughtfully about the impact of the program, as opposed to just saying it's essential and it has value. Let's put some research behind this or continue to add to the research that's already out there about the intrinsic and extrinsic value of having these programs.
Patrick Bolick is the program manager for California's Bernstein Center for Learning. Mr. Bolick, thanks so much for your time this evening. We appreciate it.
Fantastic. Take care. Bye-bye.
And right now, we'll send it back to Ann in the studio. Ann?
All right. Thanks so much, Stan.